Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. Critical race theory has been a boogeyman for the right and the left. Both of them are beneficiaries of white supremacy. They both need it, and they are strident defenders of it. The anti-black grassroots propaganda of the last few years started off on the right, where it still has its most strident spokespeople. But we see that it didn't take long at all for it to spread to the left, or should I say for the left to finally think that they had enough cover to pipe up and speak up for it themselves. And now they are trying to compete with the white right to see who can hate the black grassroots the most and demonize them the most viciously. The racist hysteria is spread by the right and being amplified by the left, who pretends to be against these attacks. But at the same time, they claim that everything the black grassroots are fighting for is a problem, and one that needs to be done away with. Why, if we don't stop those angry black people online who keep making these demands, and also making it clear that America's original sin is not going to be allowed to fall down the memory hole, why, what's going to happen is you're going to make all of those white suburbanites angry, all of those casual racists, don't you know? And next year, the white right is going to take over the country in a bloodless coup. That's what we keep being told. Oh, it's going to be the end of American democracy. Let me tell you something. American democracy is an oxymoron. It is a self-contradiction. This country has never had democracy for a single minute of its existence. Thank you, Dr. John Henry Clark. If this country tried to have democracy, it would fall in a single hour. We see what happened last summer. What brought the country to its knees was not some growing mob of white insurrectionists. That the country's got handled. It was black people who were shaking the fundamental pillars of white supremacy to its core. That's the real threat. It's always been the threat. The Democrats claim not to be in league with the Christopher Rufos and the AstroTurf white mobs at these school boards. But they also wholeheartedly agree with the white right that they must abandon critical race theory or anything called critical race theory. They actually agree and reinforce what liars like Christopher Rufo say that, well, you can't teach about slavery. You can't teach about the fact that American society is racially unequal, and you certainly can't teach about the apparatuses and institutions and practices in place that make it unequal. Why? You have to deny that that's the case. Otherwise, you're going to lose white votes. Now, they know that that's a lie. They know that it's a pretense, but that's the point. The entire point is to manufacture a pretense to justify what they were going to do anyway. As Dr. Noam Chomsky said, it's the most sophisticated form of propaganda when something claims to be opposition when in reality it's actually support. And that brings us to Bill Maher. We gave old bigot Bill the business last night, and we're coming in for a second helping of Black Truth this morning. Bill Maher has made it a point to prop up every anti-black talking point that he can for years now. Oh, he put aside all pretense that he wasn't some white supremacist, and now he just says any criticism of him is just unfair. And it just proves the intolerance of the left, which only seems to apply to black people. He is now totally thrown in with the Chris Rufos of this world. He says that white children's feelings are being traumatized by all of this stuff that these radical leftist teachers are teaching in school. Oh, my heart weeps. Let me tell you something. These white children are not being traumatized by anyone. No one has hit them. No one has called them names. No one has killed them. No one's even mistreated them. At worst, you have some right-wing activist parents who may be traumatizing their own children, making false claims. Because for decades now, there's been this rump contingent of angry white supremacists who have been trying to gin up a pretense for wholesale removing any mention of race from the classroom. And this is meant to be a precursor to removing any and all mention of race from the society altogether. That's what they think that they're going to be setting the stage for, that they're going to be making mention of anti-black racism illegitimate in the society. We are officially declaring that it's no longer valid, that it's just a relic of the past. That's what they're attempting to do. This is social engineering. As they see it, If they make it illegal to teach about race, especially in the classroom, then hopefully within a generation, there will be just enough young people who become adults without ever having been taught about it. It's the racial equivalent of Orwell's 1984. Now, for those of you unfamiliar, in Orwell's classic book, The Authoritarian Society of Oceania, this is Britain, the US, Australia, and apartheid South Africa, were at war with Eurasia. Eurasia was all of Europe and Russia. And they were also at war with a third group, East Asia. This was China, Japan, and everything in the Pacific. Now, for most of the book, Oceania was fighting a war against Eurasia and telling the people to just keep their heads down, obey Big Brother, because if you give so much as a murmur of dissent, why, that will only serve to help the enemy. It will undermine support here at home against the internal operatives of Eurasia who creep amongst us and will bring about the fall of the civilization and an end to our way of life. Say, does any of this sound familiar yet? In the novel, you had one of the most sinister organizations of all, the government's so-called Ministry of Truth, who was responsible for controlling the public through blatant propaganda. The main function that the Ministry of Truth performed was to control and censor history. In effect, to shape and reshape the national memory to whatever benefited the party. When they came upon things in the Ministry of Truth in the historical record that were inconvenient to the party, then the Ministry of Truth would simply order any reference to it to be erased or rewritten so as to make the party look good. And they would then issue history books with the erased or rewritten material in it. People would be taught that this revised history was in fact the correct one all along. It was by this method that the people could be made to forget what had actually happened or be made to think of total lies as being gospel truth. The government fed the people a constant stream of anti-Eurasian hate. The Eurasians were the eternal enemy, that the people must focus all their will and all their mind on defeating Eurasia. The people ran around with anti-Eurasian signs. Hating Eurasia was like a religion to them. However, in the end, the government, which had been telling the people that they were at war with Eurasia, eventually found themselves having to turn their attention to China and Japan, that is, East Asia. So in less than an hour, the government told the people that they're at war with East Asia and must focus all their will and all their mind towards defeating the East Asian enemy, that East Asia is responsible for all their woes and must be defeated. And don't give a murmur of dissent, by the way, because that would only embolden the enemy. The people who had spent so long hating Eurasia were now being told to hate East Asia with equal ferocity. Naturally, the people were confused. They asked, "Are we now at war with East Asia?" To which the party issued propaganda saying, "We have always been at war with East Asia." This is what people like Bill Maher are trying to bring about in the United States. The U.S. is not now a racially equal society. The U.S. has always been a racially equal society. Orwell would be envious. And the people accepted what the party told them because they had been conditioned to. And while there were a few people who would grumble at the fact that they were clearly being lied to, most of them would go along with it. And the children and adolescents who heard this propaganda wouldn't even question it, because the party had made it illegal to teach them the truth, and made it impossible to find the truth in the first place. This is an organized, concerted effort going on. Issuing textbooks that refer to our ancestors as having lives of quiet dignity on the plantations, referring to the slaves brought from Africa as being immigrants, or in many cases just deciding we're going to cut down on the number of pages devoted to slavery. Haven't we talked about that enough already? See, the rest of history is never too old or repeated too many times to be taught again. Everything else needs to be taught. We need to keep history alive by repeating it. Oh, does that go for American slavery? Well, haven't we talked about that enough? Haven't we spent enough time on that? Because it would be traumatic for white children. What's traumatic is for white children to be taught that they are not the beneficiaries of a society that has been engineered for hundreds of years to be racially polarized in favor of those classified as white. Funny how none of these angry white parents ever asks what happens to the mind of a white child when they eventually learn the truth about race in America, after they and their parents and the government and society has taught them nothing but lies. Apparently, brainwashing and indoctrinating white children with racist lies, that's not trauma. Nobody's thinking about the trauma of that. And none of them gives a word to black children. They make it manifestly clear we're not concerned about black children even in the least. They're not even part of the discussion. That's deliberate. This is about making it where we're going to completely exclude black children from any consideration when it comes to talking about education. What happens to black children, however, is a hell of a lot worse than just mere phony made-up trauma. And what these people try to call trauma, what they want people to think of as trauma, is nothing more than just some people who got their noses bent out of joint because they heard some realities that they desperately have been trying to avoid. These are hurt feelings caused by guilt. Well, what happened to Tamir Rice wasn't emotional trauma. His feelings didn't get hurt. He was murdered. Aiyana Jones was 7 years old, and she was murdered by a white cop who was never prosecuted. Her feelings weren't hurt. She was murdered. Trayvon Martin was chased down and murdered by a gun-wielding anti-black racist. His feelings weren't hurt. Trayvon Martin was murdered. We have to hold the supremely delicate feelings of the dominant society in higher regard than black people's lives, black children's lives. These are the ultra-hypersensitive snowflakes who are so fragile that merely telling them basic history and telling them what's on the headline of their own newspapers makes them lose their minds. It should be ridiculous on its face to even entertain a conversation like this with them, but the problem is they're the ones who control the levers of power in the society, all the while proclaiming that they're being oppressed by people who don't have the power to oppress anyone. But that's the entire point. Black murders never matter as much as white feelings. White supremacists and those who benefit from it are never accountable for their behavior. Slave owners were always just men of their time. Segregationists were also men of their time, or at most the innocently ignorant victims of a regional culture that's kind of off. And we have heard that particular line of guff ever since. The times may change, but the lies and the liars remain the same. See, black people are always responsible for their behavior. They always know exactly what they're doing. But on the other hand, if you're classified as white, why, you had no idea what you were doing was wrong. It's always someone else's fault. By the way, Bill Maher on that little sideshow of his, he flatly denied that these angry white mobs at the school boards were opposed to teaching history. It's not that they're opposed to teaching history. They're not against teaching history. The only thing that they complain about is history. He's part of the group pushing the lie that someone's teaching that white people are inherently evil. Nobody's doing that. You notice how nobody can actually prove that any of that stuff's going on? Nobody's teaching that white people are inherently evil or that white children are born racist. That's not happening at all. That's some of that crap, the lies that Christopher Rufo keeps telling. And when you ask, where's the proof of all of this stuff that you claim that's going on, you're always saying that there's a historical curriculum, there's a school curriculum, the school curriculum, that's the problem. Well, what part of the school curriculum? The historical part. So teaching that the United States had slavery, that's critical race theory. Teaching that Thomas Jefferson and George Washington were slave owners, that's critical race theory, which of course is exactly what the Manhattan Institute's operative Christopher Rufo said he was going to do. He said we got to spread the talking point that anything we don't like is critical race theory. Nobody can point to where children of any color are being taught that white people are evil. Even Chris Rufo has failed to prove his own unfounded lies. But that's the point. You can't disprove a negative. And they figure as long as they don't admit that they're lying, the people who go to these meetings, the Bill Mahers of the world, they're going to pretend to believe that critical race theory is some sort of world-shattering threat that will bring down the nation. And hopefully they can get some momentum off of that. Because when you talk to Bill Maher, this guy had a bug up his raggedy, hairy, wrinkled behind long before critical race theory had any hysteria attached to it. Bill Maher has long been whining about wokeness on college campuses. He's long been whining about political correctness before that. It seems like there's never a time that Bill Maher didn't have a problem with what was being taught on school campuses. But you see, for the white right, they realized that trying to gin up some phony hysteria about college campuses, they were never going to get anywhere doing that. So now they've just decided, oh hell, we're going to go for broke and claim that they're teaching anti-white nonsense in kindergarten. Why, they're teaching it in preschool. They're teaching anti-white hate in preschool. They just decided to hell with it. And the people who are pretending to believe them, they understand that. Like, yeah, we're all going to get behind this lie so we can try to achieve our super objective of attempting to erase any mention of race. Because the second you start taking on race, when you start taking on white supremacy, when you start exposing anti-black racism, well, that's going to force changes on the society that will not be beneficial to those classified as white. So we got to stop that now. We got to try to stop it once and for all. And we're going to do it to protect the children. This is the white supremacist playbook. Invent a false threat, tell people they have to attack the threat now, and you can't stop to examine whether there's a threat because it would be too late. It'll be too late if you do that. This was what caused the war in Vietnam and the Second Gulf War. Why, we can't wait for evidence. We can't wait for you to examine the issue. A false threat, false urgency, so that they can bring about real damage. And before I go any further, Bill Maher had his favorite pet Negro, Michael Eric Dyson, on his show last time. And Dyson clearly is listening to us because he had to admit that Democrats in Virginia failed to scare black voters to the polls, and that, as Dyson put it, Trump is no longer a good whipping boy for the Democratic Party. Hey, Michael Eric Dyson, if you're going to steal my talking points, the least you could do is give me credit for it. I've been saying that the Democrats wouldn't be able to run on Trump ever since Election Day. To quote myself, the Democrats have run out of orange-skinned racists to scare us to the polls with. I've been saying that ever since Election Day. I didn't even wait for the day after Election Day. Go back in the archives, you can find it here. Soon as the networks were saying we're calling the election for Biden, I didn't trip. In fact, what I looked and said was, well, at the very least, you have run out of orange-skinned racists to scare black folks to the polls with. You're not going to be able to pull this stunt anymore, and indeed they haven't. So now you got Michael Eric Dyson, one of these Negro bootlicks, always the last to know, bringing up the rear. Oh, I guess they're not going to be able to run on Trump anymore. Yeah, you would have known that months ago, Michael, if you had followed the black media. But given the fact that you're regurgitating my talking points, sounds like you already do follow us. Bill Maher thought that he had scored some points by talking about self-segregation by students on college campuses. Not surprisingly, Dyson basically rolled over and conceded that point without an argument. If there is self-segregation going on college campuses, I can understand why the black students would do it. You had the case of a black female student who became violently ill because her white roommate decided to use her toothbrush as a tampon, I suppose, temporary tampon, you could say. The school didn't do anything about it, and the courts didn't do anything about it either. You've had campus so-called security who have pulled guns on black students, assaulted black students. You've had white students who have called police and tried to get black students thrown out of study hall. And you've had campus administrators, white administrators on these campuses, who have always taken the side of the anti-black racists. They've always gotten into lockstep and circled the wagons for whoever is instituting some racism against a black person. They never seem to take the black folks' side. They never do anything about it. They never say, this college has some heft. We've got our alumni. We're going to bring all of our resources to bear to punish campus security. We're going to be expelling these people who are harassing these black students. And we're going to put pressure on the politicians. Hey, we are a college town after all. We got some influence. We're going to put pressure on the politicians to make sure that anything that's injurious to these black students is stopped. The campus alumni don't do that. The campus administrators don't do that. The dean doesn't do that. Instead, they give the same old phony tisk tisk. Oh, if only we would hope that this doesn't hurt anyone. We all want to be one big happy family. Then they go right back to supporting the anti-black racists. So if there are students who are self-segregating, I can certainly understand why the black students would do so. It's out of self-preservation. But of course, Michael Eric Dummy didn't say anything about it, and of course Bill Maher wouldn't. We won't say anything about that Uncle Tom clown that they had on the panel too. Apparently he's good friends with John McHore. We don't need to discuss that any further. But you see that the stuff that was previously spoken on the right has now had the ball handed off to those on the left, and it's not just the James Carvilles doing this. You're not just seeing this happening on white media cable shows. They're doing a full court press across the board. They want to make it very clear that wherever you go, this is going to be the steady drumbeat of anti-black racism that's going to be pounding all the time. Why, these niggers, they don't have a point. They don't have a case. Whatever they're talking about is not that important. Why, they're doing real harm to white students. And think about the children. You know, racism is really a thing of the past. That's what that other idiot, that Glenn Lowry chucklehead that Maher had on was saying that, oh, if we could just get past race. Again, we got another Negro who's looking for a white audience. I guess he's figuring if he kissed butt long enough, he'll get a Fox News show. Though he's going to have to compete with Bill Maher on that one, apparently. But the last time that I heard a black man silly enough to be talking this kind of brain-dead, asinine garbage about it's the 21st century, not the 19th. We need to get beyond race. Last time I heard a black man talking that stupid, it was Henry Skip the Truth Gates. Post-racial America, remember that? That's what he was saying after Obama was elected. Post-racial America, post-racial America. And then the real America, a white man with a badge and a gun, barged in his house and said, I don't give a damn if your ID says you live here. I'm taking you out of here in handcuffs. Didn't care that the man's a cripple. He's a doggone handicap. And what happened to the white cop who mistreated Skip Gates, who arrested him under false pretenses? Did he lose his job? Did he get suspended? Did he even get charged with anything? Did they say, hey, we're taking your badge from you, we're going to put you on trial? Didn't do anything to him. See, that's the last time that I heard a black man trying to talk as if race was just a relic of the past in America. Anytime you hear a black person saying that, that's a Negro looking for a white audience. You know, kind of like in 2004 at the DNC convention when then senatorial candidate Barack Obama was saying, there is no black America, there is no white America, only the United States of America. This while the vice presidential candidate, a white man, John Edwards, was saying there were two Americas. The white guy was telling the truth. It was the biracial one who was spouting lies. So it shouldn't surprise anyone that you see the white media trying to raise up these old fossils like this Glenn Lowry clown, this moron. He's like 73 years old. He's one of the black baby boomers. And of course, you got the white media trying to credentialize these idiots and trying to treat them as if, oh, these are just some sort of wonderful intellectuals. No, they're not. They're professional butt kissers and butt lickers. These guys are not at all academics. They are repeaters. They just repeat whatever it is that their white paymasters tell them to say. These clowns, as far as they're concerned, as long as the white administrators will let them go to the campus bathroom with them, as far as they're concerned, they'll sell out every black person in America and every black generation to come. But this is what's going on in the white media now. Oh, they want to make very clear that everyone's getting on code against us. The bad news is, of course, the bad guys have greater resources and they have an upper hand for now. But the good news is, what we have done with our meager, feeble strength has been enough to shake these bastards to their core. And people like Michael Eric Dyson, who would try to pretend as if they don't know anything about the black media, yeah, here they are talking just like us. Trying to preserve what few scintilla of credibility they like to pretend that they have. That boy was irrelevant a long time ago. And Bill Maher is also circling the toilet bowl of irrelevance as well. You know, there's an old saying, many a truth spoken in jest. The problem with that, though, is that comedians are by their very nature storytellers. Most of what they say is made up, things that never happened in the first place. There may be a few truths told in jest, but not where unfunny men like Bill Maher are concerned. With him, the lies far outweigh any truths. Good day, and be one.